Welcome to Always Ageless, where we celebrate the wisdom, vibrancy, and possibilities of living life well at every age. I'm your host, Valerie Vandesover, and today's episode is all about designing a life that supports you, not just as you age, but as you thrive. Our guest today is someone who we're very fond of on this show. She's been with us before. She was with us when we just started our show last year, and we wanted her back. She's passionate about guiding older adults and their families through life's transitions with clarity, care, and confidence. You'll recognize her as Dr. Karina Loyo. She's the author of a new powerful book, The Longevity Blueprint, a practical and empowering guide that covers the pillars of aging well, which are health, wealth, and purpose. So, whether you're planning for your own future or helping a loved one navigate theirs, today's conversation will give you some insights and some tangible steps that you can take now to live life with more intention, safety, and joy. So, grab a cup of tea or turn up the volume if you're driving in your car, get comfortable, and let's dive in. I do have to say, last week I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Loyo in person. She's a delightful lady. She's powerful. She's kind. She's sweet. She's a hard worker. She's energetic. She's great to have in a room. And she crochets all the time and is an inspiration. She makes made little octopuses for us. And I'd love her to tell. She puts a little poem with those, tell the story about those. But she's wonderful, and you will love having her in your living room or in your car with you today. So welcome, Dr. Loyo.
Thank you, Valerie. I am so excited to be here and be able to share with your audience.
Well, tell us a little bit about, now we know from before, a little bit about your background. Your father wanted you to be a veterinarian, I think was the story. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, he did. And I had had enough of animals and thought it was more important to focus on humans.
Well, we're
And
glad you did.
yes, and the truth of the matter is, when I was graduating from high school, my grandfather called and asked if there was any way that we could move back. And my mom said there's absolutely no way. And so, since I was graduating from high school, I offered to come and help him out with my grandmother who had Alzheimer's. And so I moved to San Marcos, Texas to help them. And 3 months after I got here, my grandfather had a stroke. And 3 days after that, I turned 19. So that was my intro to caregiving and working with people who are aging.
And as many of us would say, baptism by fire, so to speak, right? All it was
Yeah,
all at once.
it was a totally different college experience. We'll just put it that way.
Yes, yes, it was. So tell us, we talked to you earlier, and now you have a new book that wasn't ready yet when we talked to you last year. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write the Longevity Blueprint.
So there are so many things that we just have nowhere to go find out about. What is it that we should expect as our parents get older? And how should we support them so that they can have the best outcome possible? And most of my life has been focused on trying to reduce stress and live the healthiest possible. And so I've done a lot of research in that area. And of course, when you become a caregiver, one of the biggest challenges is that life, work, and caregiver balance. And it is so hard to do that, right? And you want to be able to do anything and everything your parents need. But you're also dealing with, wow, I can't believe mom and dad are having these issues now. And so there's that whole having to come to terms with the fact that your parents are aging and that they're not who they used to be. And the biggest thing that I saw over and over, though, was that there would be a medical crisis. And then as a result of that medical crisis, there would be a lot of decisions made very quickly in this very, very stressful environment. And while those decisions were made out of love, they didn't really consider the whole picture. And so, one of the issues that I saw happen over and over is that these medical crises quickly became a generational financial crisis. And so, I wrote the book to help people understand all aspects of aging, the ecosystem of it, and to ensure that they're protecting their assets so that they do last as long as they possibly can.
So much truth in those sentences. We've have a family situation where one of my family members lives in Texas, came here to visit just for a few weeks, and said to me the other day, I had no idea. I knew my parents were getting older, but I had no idea what they were dealing with and what I was going to see when I got here.
Right.
And I had an appointment with my doctor yesterday morning. We had the same conversation. He said, we kind of don't know what to do. Everybody's now taking care of their parents, and now we are retirement age, and now we're still taking care of our parents again. So there's so much that there's so much truth in the fact that we just don't know what to do. We just don't know what to do. So I want to hear more about your book. Tell me, and tell our audience, our listeners and our viewers, what does longevity really mean to you besides just living a long time?
Well, I think more important than the living a long time is living well, right? I mean, we want to be what in the gerontology industry we call the successful agers. So they're the ones that are, in their 90s and they are still doing everything that you think a 60-year-old would typically be able to do. They're still driving, they're going to the grocery store, and they're doing it well. They're not doing it, endangering people, right? I mean, because driving can become dangerous
Sure.
at a certain point in time. I mean, if you need a walker, you shouldn't be driving. Your reactions are not going to be very fast. So there are the people who are living long but have that high quality of life and they're still healthy. Many of them may just be taking one or two medications or even none at all. But it's all about the lifestyle that they have chosen. And of course, good genes really help. But we know from a lot of the scientific studies that even if you didn't get blessed with the best of genes, your lifestyle choices will determine whether the genes express or they don't. And so you can choose to have a totally different outcome than your family has. Now, Valerie, a lot of people think that you look at your family and see how they have aged and that that's your trajectory. And that doesn't have to be the case. The problem that most people don't recognize is that many times we develop habits, lifelong habits, because that's what our parents modeled for us and their parents modeled for them. But the reality is that we have the ability to change any and all of those habits. And so if you happen to grow up in a family that maybe was overweight and didn't exercise, that doesn't mean you have to remain overweight and not exercise for the rest of your life. You have that choice. You can choose to put yourself first. Think about what things you're putting in your body, making them healthier, and then taking that time to exercise because that's going to be the biggest predictor as to what's really going to happen later in life. And it's not about being skinny because, I don't advocate for skinny, skinny. I advocate for healthy, healthy because that's
Sure.
more important than what you
Yes.
look like. It's how healthy are you? Because that's going to predict how you end up living the rest of your life.
And we also know that people who are really fit also still may have a heart condition or something else that causes them to have a shorter life than someone else.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I had a friend in college that at 22, the day after he graduated, ran a 10K. So he was a very healthy, fit young man and had a heart attack and died.
Mm.
So it can happen at any time. It doesn't, heart attacks don't discriminate.
No, unfortunately, and it seems that cancer doesn't either, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. And you have to make the best choices for yourself when it comes from cancer. And I'm glad you brought that up because most recently I have client that I've been working with. And at 84 years old, she was diagnosed with cancer. And we went together to one of her appointments, and the doctor suggested that she needed to have a lumpectomy immediately, chemotherapy, followed by radiation. But it was only a stage one triple negative, which, triple negatives are extremely aggressive. But we went for a second opinion. And then the second opinion, the doctor says, I'm a little bit confused as to why they wanted to do the chemotherapy because you're stage one. And the national guidance says that for stage one, you don't have to do chemotherapy, it's optional. And so is the radiation. So you have to be informed and you have to advocate for yourself because I can tell you, had she done the chemotherapy, you've got to balance that out with what is that going to do to your quality of life. And for a person who's in their 80s to have 3 months where they're going to not feel great and they're probably not going to move and they're probably not going to exercise, that can have a huge toll in the remainder of their life. And so she didn't do it. Um, Either one, chemo or radiation. She did do the lumpectomy. It's been a year since she had this done, and her new mammogram came back with nothing. So, you have to decide for yourself because only you really know what's truly best for your body and your quality of life. And I think that's really an important thing to think about. And just like cancer, though, we don't know when something else like a stroke or a heart attack or a fall are going to hit, right? And so my book is really all about let's plan ahead of time because if you're in a situation which suddenly you can't speak or you're unconscious, then what is your family supposed to do? And why should they make the choice over your life? And then wonder for the rest of their life whether they made the right choice and whether that would have been the choice that you would have made. Why not give them the gift of you making that choice and leaving some instructions for should this worst case scenario happen? This is how I want you to take care of me.
Mhm. And I
Hmm.
worry one of my actual biggest fears is that I something will happen to me. I had a brother-in-law that was in a coma for several months, and I worry
Hmm.
that something like that would happen to me, and I would be able to hear people, but they wouldn't know I could hear them. And I
Yes.
and I wonder sometimes if that even happens with Alzheimer patients. I don't know, but I think that your thought to plan ahead and know what they would want. I have a list of music that if something happens to me and I'm in a coma, I want my sister to play the piano for me, right? I have all my songs lined up. So something as simple as that, I think, is um, is meaningful.
Oh, absolutely. Because I can tell you there's certain music that just annoys the heck out of me, right? But some people really like that music. And so I could see a family member playing that music for me and me sitting there thinking, oh my God, when is this ever going to end? This is torture, you know? And so it
Yep.
is really important to be able to think about, what are those things that I like, don't like? I mean, if you get annoyed by seeing the towels not hanging straight, then you need to write that down and tell people, make sure that the towels are hanging straight. Make sure that the light switches are working the right way. When there's two light switches in a room, right? You want them either both off or both on, what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I think we don't think about those things. And a lot of it, I believe, is because we just are not comfortable about ever thinking about the negative what if this ever happens to me, which, makes sense. Life is to be lived and to be enjoyed. But the reality is that there are some circumstances that happen occasionally to people. And why shouldn't we be prepared and do it not for us necessarily. I mean, yes, for us, because at the end of the day, we're the ones receiving the care, but do it more out of love for your family so that they can know that they're taking care of you the way you would like to be taken care of. And let them know what food you don't like. Because what if
Yeah.
they serve you stuff you don't like? You
Yeah,
know?
those are all great points. Yeah, we don't think about, right?
E-
And what if someone can't communicate with you. And those are really, really good points. Well,
Yeah,
let's
because
talk.
like
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
because for example, when my grandfather had a stroke, he had a speech impediment as a result
Oh,
of it. Now, I could understand him pretty well, but most other people couldn't understand what he was saying, you know? So if nobody had understood what he was saying, then he wasn't going to get what it is that he wanted. And my grandmother, through her Alzheimer's, as it progressed, she became more and more silent. So then you had to be asking and prompting, do you need to go to the bathroom? Do you want to go lay down? And she could answer yes or no or nod her head, but she wasn't going to carry on a conversation. And the other thing about as people get older, you need to give them more time to respond to those questions. I
yeah.
mean, it may take up to 90 seconds. And another thing is if you're going to ask them something and you're going to repeat it to them, make sure you repeat it exactly the same way you said it the first time. Because if you change one or two words, then all of a sudden it is a brand new question for them and they're reprocessing all of it. But if you just repeat it exactly the same way, it's okay to repeat it the same way. And that doesn't necessarily restart the clock on their answer. And so it really is about educating yourself about the different conditions that people may end up with and how best to communicate with them if you have a loved one that is in that situation.
Definitely good advice. Good advice.
Mhm.
Your book offers a guide to health, wealth, and purpose. Why did you choose those three pillars?
Well, it's interesting. I kind of reverse them in the title, but I start the book off with purpose because purpose is really the most important thing. There has to be something that drives us or motivates us to continue thriving. And so really focusing on that purpose, I think is important. It is what keeps you going and keeps you motivated, right? So exercise, it's not easy. Some days you don't want to go to the gym or you don't want to,
That's true.
yeah, do those 10 push-ups or whatever it is that your goal is for the day. There's so many other things that are a lot more fun than that. But you have to think about, what is the best for my body? And so when you have that purpose in mind, for example, I met with a couple and they were thinking they were wanting to move. And then they decided after our conversations that, yeah, that didn't make sense at all because they were going to be moving about 20 minutes away, but their whole circle of people that they engaged in and socialized with are right in their community because they've lived in that particular house for 10 years.
A long time.
And right, very long time. And I mentioned this because social support is also really important. Well, one of the things that concerned them and the biggest motivation for moving was that he has a neuropathy-like condition. So if he's not paying attention, he can't feel where his feet are hitting the ground. And so he's
Oh,
more prone for falling. Yeah. And they're both in their late 80s. And so they're concerned about, a fall or maybe a heart issue because he has had quadruple bypass 5 years ago. So he's doing
okay.
really well. But he confessed, he's like, "Yeah, I just am not motivated to go exercise." And I'm like, "Well, are you motivated to stay in this house?" He says, "Yes." I said,
Well,
"Okay. Well, then let's make that the motivation for you to exercise."
because if I want to stay here, then I must need to, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, if you want to stay in this house, then you have got to work on weightlifting and training and balance because those are going to be the biggest things that end up ensuring that you're able to stay in this house. Sorry, allergies are attacking me.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Yes, it's that time of year. And hopefully he took your advice and made some changes.
So far, yes.
Let's start with health, or let's go to health. So what are some of the first important steps that someone should take when they, in order to age well physically and mentally? Those may
Well,
seem pretty obvious, but to our audience, what would you say?
I would say that probably the most important thing from the health point of view is to exercise. And specifically, it is the weight bearing exercises. You know, Valerie, we talk about women over 40 not being able to lose weight and gaining all this weight. It's like no matter what you do, you're gaining weight. Well, what we know is
It
that
seems that way.
you've lost muscle mass. And so as we lose muscle mass, then our metabolic, which is our resting metabolism, burns less calories all day long. Now, if we work on weightlifting and we really push ourselves to lift weights that are heavier each time, I mean, you want to max out. You want to do it carefully. If you don't know how to weight lift, you may need to get a trainer to teach you how to do it. But essentially, you're going to try to do like 8 to 10 repetitions and be tired by the end of those 8 to 10, like barely being able to lift the weights. Now, I like something called super slow weightlifting.
All
So
right.
that, yeah, so that is where instead of like going, you normally go one up and down and up and down. With super slow, you go like, one, two, three, four, five. Now you're up. Or you can count to 10 to lift that weight up, right? So in the process of doing that, super slow is like slow, 10 count, and then 5 to 10 count down. Why? Why is that so much better than the up and down? Well, you're less likely to hurt yourself. So in weightlifting, they also have a movement called a jerk and lift. So that's when you like push it really fast. And well, you can injure yourself very easily on that one if you're not using the correct form. And if you're doing the super slow, you know whether you can lift that or not. I mean, you can feel it all the way up. And what you're doing is you're loading your muscles with that weight over a period of time. And so it creates a not only a strengthening from the pushing the weight up, but there's also kind of a prolonged isometric contraction that is continuous that is happening. And so what they've found is with this type of weightlifting, you actually tend to build muscle mass and strength faster.
Really?
Now, mhm. Now, as women, we are not going to get like super toned, super buff. We're not going to be the Demi Moore, on the movie. I can't remember what movie she was where she got really built. I
Yes.
mean, you would have to do a ton of weights to be able to get to that point. But if you can build muscle mass, which you can by loading your muscles and reminding yourself that it is important to do those weights and to push that, because every time you lift that, then your body's like, oh, I need to stay strong because you still need me to be able to lift this,
Yes.
right? And if we stop lifting, if we stop doing those weights, and the body's like, oh, well, I don't need that muscle as much muscle. So now I can, use that for fuel as well. And that's what happens. What happens is, we're kids and we run around like crazy and we have all this energy. And then as we get into our 20s to 40s, we're working, we're trying to move up the ladder. So we're sitting and sitting and sitting
Right.
at our desks.
Where? Yeah.
And so by the time we hit 50 and 60, we have so much less muscle mass than we did when we were in our early 20s. And so if we weight lift, we can get the muscle mass back that we had in our early 20s. And that has a incredibly positive effect as we get older. Because
And
not
then
only,
balance, of course, is a big
yes,
factor also, right?
right, yes. And what's interesting is kind of balance and the strength training go hand in hand. Because as you're building more muscle, then there is more structure there to help you stay balanced, right?
Okay.
The
Good
muscles are
point.
stronger, right? So you're going to be more balanced. Now, yes, there are other things that cause balance issues as we get older. Your sight can cause issues, your hearing can also affect it. and so can medications. Some medications have a side effect of dealing, with
Oh,
balance. If you want to be aware of those things. But yeah, I highly recommend that people do things like, for example, balance exercises. Just think about when you're standing and waiting for things to happen. Here's an example. You're brushing your teeth. You know you're standing there. Why don't you stand on one foot and practice that balance during that time, right? You're cooking every day, you're cooking. Now, you want to be far enough from the stove that you're not going to fall on the stove, or you're going to want to be able to hold somewhere like the sink, right? But
sure.
there are times when you're waiting for the water to boil, you can do balance exercises there. You can actually hold on to your sink and do some squats. It doesn't have to be a whole hour of exercise, so, back to back. It can actually be exercise all day long.
Those are
And
really
then,
good ideas.
yeah,
That's really good ideas. I'm sure there's someone listening to us today who's thinking, I never thought of that. Right?
yes. I mean, you can even do that in the grocery store. Nobody knows if you put all your weight on one foot and not on the other. They have no idea. They're not paying attention to you. So there's so many times that you can actually do these things. And it's all about these little lifestyle changes that you do, these little habits all day long. When you get up out of your chair, stand up for a minute there on one foot.
Absolutely. Now, you talk also about the importance of building or assembling, I should say, maybe a supportive medical team. So, who
Yes.
should that include? And how do you know that they're going to work well together and that it's the right people?
Well, so you need to identify a good primary care provider that is going to be cooperating and leading your healthcare. And you can have that conversation with them. It may be the provider that you currently have, and you just need to make them aware of anybody else that you may be seeing. Now, who may you be seeing? A lot of people, if they have diabetes, are likely to have an endocrinologist.
Okay.
You know, if it has progressed, they may even have a kidney specialist, so a nephrologist. So it really depends. If you are having starts of dementia or depression, you may be seeing a psychiatrist as well or a neurologist. So you do need to start looking and thinking about who these people may be that end up being a part of your team. And don't ever assume that your primary care provider, or actually that any of them, really know all of the medications you're on and for what purpose. So you need to keep a list of that and be able to provide it at every appointment and ensure that it's been updated. And let me tell you one thing about this, Valerie, is that when it comes to medications, they know exactly how to prescribe them, but they don't always consider how we're going to wean you off of them. So many
Mm,
times, yes, so many times what'll happen is you end up at the hospital. As you get older, you'll visit the hospital more often. And at the hospital, they're dealing with a crisis. So they're going to put you on a bunch of meds to deal with that crisis. And they're going to tell you go see your doctor. And your doctor is supposed to review all those medicines and decide if you need to stay on them or not. Or if there's maybe a better combination of medications when now that things are under control and that they know your history and they can take your time to really review things. But many times what happens is that review doesn't happen, and so as a result you end up with additional medications. In fact, I know of people who've been taking 2 or 3 medications for their heart and really should only be taking one of those.
fun.
Or my real life example was with my mother. So at one point in time, my mother ended up on 14 medications.
Oh, gosh.
Yes. And because of these 14 medications, there were some side effects related to incontinence. And as a result of that, there was the questioning as to whether or not she could take care of herself because of hygiene reasons. And so there was a discussion about putting her in memory care. Well, she'd been in independent living. And so I went back to her doctor and I said, we need to have a pharmacist review these medications that she's on. We need you to review them, and then we need to have a specialized pharmacist. So there's actually pharmacists that specialize in medication review.
Yeah.
And so he set us up with that appointment, and we went. Well, there were four medications that would cause the explosiveness that she was experiencing, and that was the root of her hygiene problem, was the explosions she was having. And so they took away the medications, changed them to something else. We went from these 14 medications down to 7. And as a
Whoa.
result of that, not only did her quality of life improve because suddenly this whole incontinence thing kind of went away and resolved itself, but it also had a secondary effect where her mind became clearer and conversations started to get longer. And
Uh,
so, you know, there are side effects when you take more than 4 medications. There's no way to know how they're interacting inside of your body. And so I tell people that it is a really good idea to look at your medications at least on an annual basis. Or if you've been in the hospital or suddenly had an illness where they put you on some more meds, that you really ask for things to be reviewed. I can tell you in parts of Europe, they require an annual review of all the medications, and it's precisely for this reason.
that's brilliant. And am sitting here thinking of situations in our own extended family of where that's happened, um, and someone then was taken off of one that completely changed their life, and they never needed it to start with. Same thing with
Yeah.
my husband's mom, where they kept giving her medicine, and no one ever. There wasn't anyone who was in charge of making sure that everything was coordinated.
Right. And, there's a cholesterol medication that was taken off the market several years ago. Well, it had been given to my mother-in-law, and it had caused her to feel aches and pains all over her body. And so she decided she would go soak in a bathtub. She soaked in the bathtub for about 15, 20 minutes, decided she was ready to get out, and could not get out of that tub. It was 3 hours before her husband finally heard her hollering for him and was able to get help. Of course, she stopped taking the medication immediately and was able to walk and have no additional aches and pains. She was actually in her early 60s. So, there are side effects that will make people feel like, oh gosh, I've got all the aches and pains of being old. No, old does and aches and pains don't really go together. You can age without aches and pains. So certainly at some point in time we're going to feel some weaknesses and things like that. But
We will.
if we're working out and taking care of ourselves and we don't have unnecessary side effects from medications, we should have a really decent quality of life as we get older.
Yeah. And my mom is 105, as you know, and she's just takes one blood pressure medicine. That's all.
Yeah,
That's all she takes.
yeah.
And she's still alive, so I'm assuming that that's a good thing. I'm not sure.
That is, yeah,
Sounds
that's
like
a
a good
great
thing.
thing. That is amazing.
One of the things that we talk about often in the groups that you and I are in is aging in place.
Yes.
We're fond of aging in place, and so many people again had this discussion yesterday with my doctor. Our parents don't. We talk about this all the time. People don't want to move. They want to stay there in their house. Um, and why? Because they've lived in that house. They've had their family there. They have memories there. They're comfortable. They don't have to make major changes or move, like you said, from their friends or so forth. So, what are some of the simple things you think that people could think about and do to make aging in place more realistic and more possible for them?
Well, I think the first thing is that you have to have a home that's adequate for aging in place. You cannot have a two-story home where there is no bedroom and adequate bathroom downstairs. And even if you think everything is adequate, sometimes you're surprised and it's not. And I will share my story. So, knowing that my mother was living with me after my dad had passed, when I moved from a house I was renting to a house that I purchased, I made sure that it had a downstairs full bathroom and an additional bedroom downstairs because this is a two-story home. And fast forward, it never occurred to me to think about making sure that the door into that bathroom was wide enough to get a
Oh,
wheelchair in or a walker through. Now, my grandfather had told me years and years ago when I lived with him that he always took pride in his very wide hallways and very wide doors. And it was because someday he was going to end up in a wheelchair, and he did. And he was able to stand in his home because it was appropriately built. He was an industrial arts guy, and he built it for aging in place. Well, the home that I purchased turns out it had an 18-inch doorway, which,
ooh,
for most of us to walk through is pretty good. But when your walker is 18 inches and 3/4, it does not go
doesn't
through
fit.
those 18 inches.
Uh,
Yeah.
yep,
And so
wait.
it seemed adequate at the time. I think I got overwhelmed by the emotion of, wow, this is a beautiful home. And I didn't do the due diligence that I should have, which was to measure that door and make sure that it was at least, really, it should be 32 inches, but at least 24. That way she could get a walker through there, but she couldn't.
Good point, because my mom lives in a 55 plus community in a single story condominium, and she keeps saying this wasn't built for older people. I said, Mom, it's a 55 plus community. She said, yes, but the door's open this way, so I have to go around the refrigerator to get into it, or there's no cabinets low enough for all of my dishes, so I have to reach up for dishes and glasses and things like that, that we, of course, they didn't think about it when they built those 30 plus years ago. But certainly all of those are good points. And I have a home that I'm selling, Dr. Loyo, and I noticed that the entrance to the bathroom, the door frame is just so banged up. And then I realized that the previous occupants of that home had a wheelchair. So
Yeah.
I'm sure going in and out of that bathroom enough times that it made some dings into the frame of the bathroom door. And certainly to your point, that's important. It's important to think
It,
about those things.
yeah, it is. And we don't often think about that. And, then there's other simple things that are important. Like, for example, if you have carpets or thresholds and changes in the type of flooring. So if you're going from a tile or a luxury vinyl plank to a carpet, that in itself could cause a trip hazard. Or if you have an area rug, is that area rug taped down? Yeah, they
Right.
have tape to tape them down. If you're going to use it, tape it down because you don't want them moving, and they're going to move at the worst possible time and you're going to land on the floor. And one of the biggest things that I tell people is you need to realize that 60% of all the falls happen in people's homes, and we want to help you avoid those. And the thing about falls after the age of 65 is that they are the number one reason for disability and death in that older population. And so we want to avoid a fall at all costs. In fact, one of the things that I tell people to do is before you stand up, if you've been sitting for more than half an hour, is you want to be able to move your kind of legs up and down a little bit. And by doing that, it'll get the blood pumping and your heart pumping, and it'll help your brain know, hey, I'm about to get up. And that's important because some of us, as we get older, for a lot of different reasons, will get up, will feel that slight dizziness, maybe see black for an instant, and have maybe feel like you're about to fall. Okay, well, you want to avoid that because normally what'll happen is people will stand up, they'll walk 2 to 3 steps, and then that whole thing will hit them, and that's what's causing people to fall. Because most people are falling as a result of that change in the blood pressure and
Really.
after they got up.
Huh.
Yes.
So that's what's important to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean that and then tripping, right? I mean if
Sure.
you're mopped and it's wet, you want to be careful.
And another thing that I see in my own situation is my mom has a walker. which she does very well, obviously. But I worry that it's going to get away from her, right? That she's going to grab it and the wheels are going to go and she's not, right? And that's going to cause a fall for her.
Yes.
Let's talk about loneliness.
Oh, goodness.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm sure that loneliness or isolation must affect longevity. How can we fight back against that? How can we keep that from happening?
Well, we know it as kind of the fastest growing epidemic. And we know that the effects of loneliness are worse than smoking a pack of cigarettes every day. So, for those of you that didn't smoke because it wasn't healthy, being lonely is just as bad as that. So, you have to have a good social support circle. So it kind of ties into purpose, right? So a lot of times just knowing that you need to be there to help someone should they need you. And that could just be that listening ear, right? It doesn't have to be physically doing anything for them. But many times that starts to not happen as you get older and you're moving less, you're spending more time in your home alone, you're maybe not communicating as much on the phone with people. And so I would recommend to really think strategically about what activities you can engage in that bring you joy and that allow you to interact with other people. And if it's hard for you to find, people to kind of check in on you or have conversations with, then maybe you need to become the person that checks on all the other people, right? You can have them
Oh,
say, "Hey, I know that you live alone, and everybody needs to have a somebody to check in to know that everything is good." Because, we don't want to be that person that fell and nobody found us for 3 days.
yes.
And, you know, that scenario, even though for a lot of you feels like, oh, that'll never happen, it happened to one of my great uncles. His family didn't check on him for 3 days. He'd fallen, broken his hip, and was unable to
Um,
get to the telephone. And so he
um,
spent 3 days on the floor. And
um,
I know. And what we know is that the longer people stay on the floor after a fall, the shorter the lifespan is going to be. And so having somebody that you call that checks in on you, even if it's just, hey, just checking in on you, making sure that you're okay. And they're like, yep, I'm up, I'm awake, and thank you for calling me. And like, I used to check in on my mom every night. Hey, mom, just calling to check on you. Do you have a good day? What did you do? I love you. And that was less than 2 minutes, but it was an everyday phone call. And I know a lot of people don't get to the age where they have friends who will go on and on about this hurts and that hurts and this hurts. And that's why you don't want to talk to those people because it's depressing. So don't be one of those. But if you are lonely, if you call somebody and just get them talking to you, then they people love to talk about themselves. And so if you're the one
they do.
asking the questions and say, "How are you doing? What are you doing that's fun? What are you thinking about doing tomorrow?" and get them talking, then that will help provide you with somebody to talk to and that social interaction so that you're not lonely. And maybe that's your purpose. Your purpose is to lift other people up. And so instead of letting yourself go into that loneliness and depression, maybe you go out and be that person that intentionally finds 5 or 10 other people that are lonely and helps pick them up or give them a smile for the day.
Yeah, that's a great idea to be the initiator of the conversations. Great idea. I heard yesterday, actually, that if I have this correct, and maybe you heard this also, you might have been on the same call with me, that Best Buy is starting a senior division and they're going to have a line that people can call and talk to someone for as long as they want, which seems like a big chore. And I'm not sure how they're going to implement that, but I'd heard that yesterday. So it'll be interesting to see if that really comes to fruition and how that works.
Yeah, and I think your insurance companies also have mental health lines that you can call. And I know that the suicide prevention line is 811, and they will talk to you about any mental health issue, not just suicide. So if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling depressed, they will still talk to you because those are some of the precursors to then people thinking about only having one alternative. And so they want to help connect you with resources. So if you don't know where to turn, 811 is always a good place to call.
A good resource. Absolutely. Well, that's
Mhm.
good to know. And we
Yeah.
should, I would, maybe everybody who's listening to us today doesn't know that. So for our audience, our listeners, 811 is the number if you need someone to talk to or to refer your family member to. How do you encourage families to approach these hard conversations when they see that there's, and we've all heard these stories, you come for a family dinner, or you hear, or you become aware of the fact that your aging parents or relatives are needing a little bit needier. They need more services, they need more attention, they need to get out, they need to make some changes. How do you recommend that families start these conversations?
Well, it kind of depends on the circumstances and the parents and the dynamics, right? But I but overall, it's coming from the heart. So what is it that you really want? And what you want is what's best for them. And so being able to say, mom, dad, how are you doing? How are you truly feeling? I'm concerned because I'm seeing XYZ happening, and I'm wondering if you're perceiving that as well. Are you seeing that? Is that causing you any issues, for example? So that's one approach, is to really go in and straightforward try to have that conversation with them. Another approach, which works for some other people, is, hey, mom and dad, I'm in the process of planning for my future and making sure that my children don't have to make these decisions for me. Instead, I'm going to write up everything that I desire to happen should I end up in the circumstances. And I'm also trying to make sure that I protect my assets and that I'm making wise choices along the way. And you have been there for me and counseled me and taught me my whole life. So I want to hear what you think about my plan.
And then the dad will be gladly give advice because they like to do that, or the mom. Good idea. Those are great approaches. Great little scripts for those conversations. Yeah, I like those a lot. Um, what do you recommend to someone who's the aging parent or the loved one, and they're feeling overwhelmed by the realization that they are aging?
So, what I recommend for people who are realizing that they're aging is to know that they could still take steps today to be healthier. Even somebody who, has a hard time getting up out of their chair and making it to the bathroom, which, maybe 20, 40 steps away, you can still improve your quality of life. And what you would do that is, instead of just getting up and going there when you need to go there, you actually want to get up and go there multiple times throughout the day. So basically, you're increasing the number of times that you walk that short distance that you're able to. So if you're only able to walk 1 or 2 minutes, that's okay. But instead of just walking 1 or 2 minutes 10 times a day, let's shoot for doubling that and doing it 20 minutes or 20 times a day, right?
Okay.
And every week you want to try to go up another minute or 2 minutes. And in a matter of a few weeks, you will be able to walk 5 or more minutes, right? And so if you just take those baby steps, that can improve your health. Now, from a point of view of planning, it really is sitting down and thinking about what it is that you would desire should anything happen. And it's not necessarily like sitting down and doing it all at once, because the reality is you're not going to think about everything if you just sit down and try to do it all in an hour. The best thing to do is keep a little notebook or keep your phone with you. Most phones have a notes app, and you can even dictate into the notes app, and you
Right.
can tell it, Hey, right now I've just made myself a cup of coffee and I like my coffee black or I like it with hazelnut creamer and only this brand, and it also needs to have 2 spoons of sugar. Whatever it is that you're doing, start putting these ideas together a little bit at a time as you go throughout your day and do this over a matter of like 3 months. By the end of those 3 months, you're going to have a really good guide on how to take care of you and what it is that you like and don't like, and what would you desire to have happen for your life.
And that also stimulates your mind, don't you think?
It does. It does. Yes. And, my book asks a lot of questions as you go through it. Not only do you read about the concepts, but then it asks you to think about how different things apply to you. And so by the time you're done going through the book, and you're not doing this in one sitting, it's going to take you a while. It looks like a textbook. I apologize for that, but it's because that's the information that needed to be given to people so that you can really get to the point of having a pretty solid plan at the end.
Is your book meant to be, let's talk about your book and where our viewers and listeners can find it. Is it meant to be a guidebook, not something just to read, but actually more like a textbook, not a boring textbook by any means, but something that people can read, they can make an action plan. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. It is meant to be read and consumed, and you need to stop and think about the questions and really think about how they apply to you. Write down some answers, and by the time you're truly done interacting with the book, you'll have a really good, solid plan. But one thing you need to know is that plans change. And just like, any business plan, I mean, if you've ever been on a trip, haven't you made different choices at the spur of the moment? Yes, things happen like that here too.
Yes.
hmm But as you go through the process of asking yourself the questions and maybe even having conversations along the way with your family members, it should make the whole plan kind of gel together and provide you with a more open relationship with your family as well.
That and that's the question I have. Is this meant something to be that the should the family member should be a part of this also? The longevity blueprint. Are most people comfortable including their family members? Should they be? Is this a book that the family members should be buying for their parents, bringing to their parents to work on?
Well, I think everybody needs to have a copy of the book
Of
because
course.
you will be using it at some point in time, and ideally sooner than later. And what I recommend is there's a whole chapter on communicating with your family because that is important, and there's some critical things that need to be addressed and how you address them. And I do ask questions about, okay, so who's going to be your medical power of attorney, and how are you going to make sure that they know that? And
Right.
how are you going to empower them? So those are important things that are in the book.
Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your day, a busy day, a busy family day. But we are so honored to have you on our show and so honored to have you as a friend of the show. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your compassion. Your work reminds us that aging is not something to fear. It's something that we can prepare for with purpose and dignity, and even with excitement and enthusiasm. So, to our listeners, if you found today's episode helpful, be sure to share it with someone else. We are going to show you where to, that her book actually has the cover of her book is similar to what's on her background, the bright sunrise, which I would assume is because your aging can be a bright part of your life, actually. And we are going to show you a cover of her book and where you can get it. So please, on Amazon, it's called The Longevity Blueprint, or at longevityblueprint.org, where you can order it. And don't forget to tune in again next week for another episode of Always Ageless, conversations that inspire you, inform you, and empower you to live a life that is always ageless. I'm Valerie V. And until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and stay beautifully ageless.